She had exactly 3 seconds to make up her mind. The rain was coming down in sheets. She could barely make out the taillights of the SUV ahead. Behind her, Derek's heavy footsteps were getting closer. His voice, a snarling threat, sliced through the storm. "I told you what would happen if you tried to run, Lily." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought it would burst right through her chest. Her legs ached, burning from sprinting several blocks in heels that had snapped and broken long ago. Her waitress uniform, soaked and clinging to her like a second skin. And then she saw it. A black Escalade. The back door was swinging open. Someone was getting out. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She did the only thing a desperate woman, with no voice and no options, could do. She jumped inside and slammed the door shut. If you've ever felt invisible, utterly unseen by the world, if you've ever been silenced by someone who claimed to love you, then this story is going to break you before it puts you back together. The man in the driver's seat froze. His hand hovered over his phone, mid-sentence in what looked like a very important call. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than she'd make in a year. His jawline was so sharp it could cut diamonds. And his eyes. His eyes were the color of a brewing storm, right before the lightning strikes. He stared at her, like she'd just materialized from another dimension, which, in a way, she had. His mouth opened. He was about to say something, probably something like, "Who are you and what are you doing in my car?" But before he could speak, she grabbed the notepad she always carried in her apron pocket, the one she used to take orders at the diner, the one she used to communicate with a world that had stolen her voice 6 years ago. Her hand trembled so violently. The pen almost slipped from her grasp, but she managed to scrawl 2 words: "Please drive." The man stared at the notepad, then at her, then back at the notepad. Outside, Derek was closing in. She could see his menacing shadow. Moving between the streetlights, he was checking every car, every alley, every dark corner. The man in the suit did something completely unexpected. Instead of throwing her out, instead of calling 911, instead of doing any of the things a normal person would do when a soaking wet stranger jumped into their car, he simply put the Escalade in gear and pulled away from the curb. She watched through the rear window as Derek emerged from the downpour, screaming something she couldn't hear. His fists were clenched, his face contorted with rage. And then he was gone. She collapsed against the leather seat, trembling uncontrollably, not from the cold, from something much, much deeper. The man drove in silence for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. She knew because she was counting. Counting was something she did when she was terrified. It helped her feel like she had some semblance of control. Finally, he spoke. "I'm going to ask you some questions. You can write the answers, or you can nod or shake your head. Whatever is easier for you." His voice was deep, calm, like he was used to dealing with crises much bigger than a random woman jumping into his car. She nodded. "Are you in danger?" She nodded again, faster this time. "Was that man following you?" Another nod. "Does he know where you live?" She closed her eyes. The answer to that question was the reason she'd been sleeping in the back office at the diner for the past 3 weeks. Derek knew everything: her address, her schedule, her route home, the names of her co-workers, the name of her landlord. He knew everything because for 2 years, He had made it his mission to own every piece of her existence. She wrote on the notepad, "He knows everything about me." The man read it. Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like anger, but not at her. "What is your name?" She hesitated. Names were powerful things. Giving someone your name meant giving them a piece of yourself. And she had learned the hard way that some people didn't deserve pieces of you. But this man had just driven away from a crime scene for her. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't judged. He had simply acted. She wrote one word. "Lily." "Lily," he said, and somehow her name sounded different in his voice, like it meant something. "Lily, my name is Alexander Blackwood. I'm going to take you somewhere safe tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do about your situation." She stared at him. Alexander Blackwood. Even she, a diner waitress who barely made enough to survive, knew that name. Blackwood Industries, technology, defense contracts, and real estate empires spanning the globe. The man driving her through the rain wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the most powerful men in the city. And he had just picked up a random mute woman fleeing from her abusive ex-boyfriend. Life, she thought, had a very dark sense of humor. This story is already resonating with viewers around the world. If it's touching your heart, consider showing your support by using the Super Thanks button below. Every contribution helps us bring more stories like this to life. Alexander drove for another 20 minutes. The neighborhoods changed, from commercial districts to residential areas to something that could only be described as another world entirely. Gates, security cameras, private roads lined with trees that probably had names. Finally, they arrived at a mansion. Not just a house, a mansion. The kind of place that had wings and probably its own zip code. The gates opened automatically. Alexander pulled into a circular driveway and parked in front of doors that looked like they belonged to a cathedral. A man in a black suit was already waiting. His posture was military. His eyes were scanning Lily like she was a potential threat. "Marcus," Alexander said, "this is Lily. She'll be staying in the guest suite tonight. Make sure she has everything she needs. Clean clothes, food, whatever she wants." The man called Marcus looked confused, but he simply nodded. "Yes, sir." Alexander turned to Lily. "You're safe here. No one gets through those gates without my permission. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." She wanted to ask 100 questions. "Why are you helping me? What do you want in return? What happens tomorrow?" But she couldn't speak, and she was too exhausted to write, so she simply nodded and followed Marcus into the mansion. The guest suite was bigger than her entire apartment. The bathroom alone could fit her kitchen, bedroom, and living room combined. There were fresh towels, upscale toiletries, a robe made of something so soft she was afraid to touch it. She stood in the middle of the room, dripping water onto a carpet that probably cost more than her car, and she cried. Not because she was sad, not because she was scared, because for the first time in 6 years, she felt like she could breathe. Little did she know that at that exact moment, in his study 3 floors above, Alexander Blackwood was making a phone call. "Find out everything about a guy named Derek," he said. "I want to know his address, his job, his criminal record, and his weaknesses. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and what keeps him up at night." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, may I ask why?" Alexander's jaw tightened. Because he made the mistake of terrorizing someone under my protection. He hung up and stared out the window at the rain still falling. Lily Chen had been in his Escalade for less than an hour, but something about her had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him, not with fear, not with greed, not with the calculated interest most women showed when they realized who he was. She had looked at him like he was simply a man who might help her. And that, in a world where everyone wanted something from Alexander Blackwood, was the rarest thing of all. The next morning, Lily woke up to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't recognize. For one terrifying second, she forgot where she was. Then it came back to her. The rain, the Escalade, Alexander Blackwood. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. What had she done? She had gotten into a stranger's car. She had come to his house. She had slept in his guest room. Derek always told her she was stupid. Maybe he was right. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Lily?" A woman's voice, polite but distant. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in the breakfast room when you are ready. I have left fresh clothes outside your door." Lily took a breath, then another. She could leave. She could walk out right now and never look back. Go back to sleeping in the back office. Go back to looking over her shoulder every second of every day. Or she could find out why a billionaire had decided to help a complete stranger. She chose the second option. The clothes outside her door were simple but elegant. A cream blouse, black pants, flats that fit perfectly. She didn't want to know how they knew her size. She followed the sounds of voices and clinking dishes until she found a room that could only be called a breakfast room, because it was probably too small to be called a ballroom. Alexander was sitting at a long table, a cup of coffee in his hand. He was not alone. A small boy was sitting across from him, maybe 5 or 6 years old, dark hair like Alexander's. But his eyes were different, distant, unfocused. He was staring at a plate of food in front of him, but not eating. "Ah, Lily." Alexander stood when he saw her. "Please, sit. This is my son, Ethan." The boy did not look up, did not acknowledge her presence at all. Alexander's voice softened. "Ethan does not speak. He has autism. Nonverbal. Most people find it difficult to connect with him." Lily looked at the little boy. Something shifted in her chest. A recognition, an understanding. She knew what it was like to be trapped inside yourself with no way to communicate. She walked around the table slowly, not toward Alexander, toward Ethan. The security guard took a step forward. "Miss, I would not recommend..." But Lily ignored him. She knelt down beside Ethan's chair. Not too close. Close enough. She did not try to speak to him with words she didn't have. She did not try to force eye contact he could not give. Instead, she simply picked up a strawberry from his plate. She held it up, took a small bite, then placed another strawberry on the table between them, an offering, an invitation. Ethan's hand twitched, his eyes flickered. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, his small fingers reached out and took the strawberry. Alexander's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "He has never..." Alexander started, then stopped. His voice was strange, thick. "He has never taken food from anyone, except me." Lily looked up at him. In her eyes was something Alexander had not seen in a very long time. Hope. What would you have done in Lily's position? Would you have trusted a stranger or gone back to the monster you knew? Leave your answer in the comments below. That single strawberry changed everything. Over the next few days, Lily found herself becoming a permanent fixture in the Blackwood mansion. Alexander had offered her a position as his personal assistant, claiming he needed someone organized and discreet, but they both knew the real reason. He wanted to protect her, and she had nowhere else to go. Derek had already visited the diner where she used to work. Her former co-workers told her through text messages. He had overturned tables, screamed at the manager, demanded to know where his girlfriend was hiding. His girlfriend, as if she still belonged to him, as if she ever had. Lily did her best to focus on work. But work, in the Blackwood mansion, mostly meant spending time with Ethan. The boy fascinated her in ways she couldn't explain. He had his own world, his own rules, his own language that only he understood. But the more time she spent with him, the more she began to understand that language too. By day 3, Ethan would sit next to her during meals. By day 5, he would bring her his toys. Not to play with, just to show her. By day 7, he did something that made his father drop a plate. He held her hand. It was brief, just a few seconds. But for a child who recoiled from physical contact with everyone except his father, it was nothing short of a miracle. Alexander found Lily in the garden that afternoon. She was sitting on a bench, watching Ethan arrange stones in patterns that only made sense to him. "How do you do it?" Alexander asked. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Every therapist, every specialist, every expert we have hired, none of them could reach him like you do in a week." Lily reached for her notepad, her constant companion, her only voice. She wrote, "I know what it is like to be trapped inside yourself." Alexander read it, then read it again. His expression shifted into something she could not quite identify. "Lily," he said slowly, "may I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "How long have you been unable to speak?" She hesitated. This was the question everyone wanted to know, but few dared to ask. The question that opened doors to rooms she had kept locked for years. But something about Alexander made her want to answer. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with pity, not with morbid curiosity, with genuine interest. She wrote, 6 years. "Since you were 18, he calculated. What happened?" The pen in her hand trembled. How could she explain? How could she describe the night that changed everything? She scrawled 3 words on the notepad. "He hurt me." Alexander's jaw clenched tight. "The same guy who's been chasing you?" She just nodded. "Derek." He spat the name out like it was pure poison. "What exactly did he do to you?" Lily closed her eyes tight. The memories. They were always there, lurking, waiting in the shadows of her mind, but she rarely, if ever, let them see the light of day. She painstakingly wrote, "He was my boyfriend. We were together for a year. When I tried to leave him, he strangled me, damaged my vocal cords. I woke up in the hospital, unable to speak." Alexander remained silent for what felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily controlled, a control that barely masked his raging fury. "And he was never prosecuted." She shook her head, then wrote, His father's a judge. The case was dismissed. They said, I fell down the stairs. Fell down the stairs. Alexander repeated those words, dripping with disgust. And he's been stalking you ever since. She wrote, he says I belong to him, that I will always belong to him, that if he can't have me, no one can. The garden was incredibly quiet. The only sound was Ethan, methodically arranging his stones. Such a peaceful setting, juxtaposed against such a violent conversation. Lily, Alexander said. His voice had changed, harder, more certain. I'm going to make you a promise. As long as you're under my protection, Derek will never touch you again. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man, who was a complete stranger just a week ago. This man, who had every reason to send her packing, but didn't. This man, whose son now reached for her hand, like she was his only lifeline. Why are you doing this? She wrote. You don't even know me. Alexander smiled. It was a subtle smile, almost imperceptible, but it completely transformed his face. Because, he said softly, some people deserve to be protected, and you are one of them. What neither of them knew was that at that exact moment, someone else was watching. Victoria Blackwood, Alexander's younger sister, stood at an upstairs window. Her arms were crossed tight. Her expression, ice cold. She had seen everything. The strawberry incident, the hand-holding, the way her brother looked at this random woman who had appeared out of nowhere. And she didn't like it. One bit. Victoria had spent years protecting her brother from gold diggers and social climbers. She had watched woman after woman try to exploit his wealth, his status, his desperate need to find a mother for Ethan Usher, and now this, a mute nobody who claimed to be running from an ex-boyfriend. It was too convenient, too perfect. Victoria snatched her phone and dialed a number. I need you to run a background check on someone, she said, her voice sharp. Her name is Lily Chen. I want to know everything. Her family, her finances, her romantic history, everything. She hung up and continued watching the garden below. If this Lily person was who she claimed to be, the background check would prove it. And if she wasn't, well, Victoria Blackwood was very good at making problems disappear. That night, Derek made his move. Lily was in the kitchen, making tea for herself. She couldn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet, too unfamiliar, too much like a dream that could shatter at any moment. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. Did you really think you could hide from me? The voice froze her blood solid. She spun around, the teacup shattering on the floor. Derek was standing in the doorway. His smile was the same smile he had worn the night he strangled her. The smile that screamed, I own you. How? Her mind screamed the question. Her mouth couldn't form. How did you get in here? Your co-worker. Maria, Derek said, answering the question he saw in her eyes. She told me everything. For a price. Of course. Did you know this mansion has 17 entrance points? I found one. The guards don't monitor. After midnight, he took a step closer. Lily backed up against the counter. 6 years, Derek continued. 6 years you've been running from me. Do you have any idea how much money I've spent finding you? How many private investigators? How many bribes? He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne. The same cologne that used to make her feel safe. Now, it made her want to vomit. And then you jump into some rich man's car and think you can just start a new life. Derek's voice rose. You think you can replace me? Lily shook her head desperately, tried to reach for her notepad. But Derek was faster. He grabbed her wrist and twisted. No more writing, he snarled. No more running. You're coming home with me tonight. And if you make a sound, if you try to get anyone's attention, I'll burn this entire mansion to the ground, with everyone in it, including that creepy kid of his. Ethan. Something snapped inside Lily. Not fear. Something else. Something that had been building for 6 long years. She brought her knee up hard, between Derek's legs. He doubled over with a grunt of surprise. She ran, but she didn't run toward the door. She ran toward the stairs, toward Ethan's room, because if Derek was going to hurt anyone, he would have to go through her first. She burst into Ethan's room. The boy was already awake, sitting up in bed, rocking slightly. He had heard the noise. Lily ran to him, wrapped her arms around him, pulled him close. Derek appeared in the doorway seconds later. His face was twisted with rage and pain. You little bitch, he hissed. You're going to pay for that. He took a step into the room, and then a voice came from behind him. A voice like ice and fire, and the promise of utter destruction. Touch either of them, and you will spend the rest of your very short life wishing you had never been born. Alexander stood in the hallway. He was wearing pajama pants and nothing else. His chest was bare. His eyes were burning, and in his hand was a gun. Derek freezed. Security, Alexander said calmly, into the phone in his other hand. We have an intruder in Ethan's room. I need him removed, permanently if necessary. Derek's face went pale, whatever he had expected. This was not it. You don't know who you're dealing with, he stammered. My father is a judge. I have connections. You can't just... I am Alexander Blackwood, Alexander interrupted. I have more connections in this city than your father has brain cells. Now, you have exactly 10 seconds to get on your knees before my security team arrives, or I will exercise my legal right to defend my home and child. Derek's eyes darted between Alexander, the gun, and Lily, still holding Ethan. For one terrible moment, Lily thought he might do something stupid. Then the sound of running footsteps filled the hallway. 6 security guards appeared, surrounding Derek. On your knees, one of them commanded. Now. Derek sank to the ground, his hands raised. But his eyes never left Lily. This isn't over, he promised. You belong to me. You will always belong to me. Alexander stepped forward. He leaned down until his face was just inches from Derek's. She belongs to herself, he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. And if I ever see you near her again, I will destroy you. Not physically. That would be too quick, too easy. I will destroy your father's law practice, your family's reputation in Greenwich, every connection you have ever made, every single bridge you've ever built. I will turn you into a ghost, a nobody. Do you understand me? Derek's face was ashen, completely white. Do you understand me? Alexander repeated, his voice hard. Yes, Derek whispered, barely audible. Good. Get him out of my house. The security team, burly guys in dark suits, dragged Derek away. Lily watched him go, still holding on to Ethan. She was shaking, trembling, fighting the urge to just collapse right there. But Ethan was patting her arm, gently, rhythmically, the way she had shown him when he was feeling overwhelmed. He was comforting her, and for the first time in 6 years, Lily Chen allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. The next morning, Alexander called an emergency meeting with his legal team. First thing, "I want a restraining order," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I want criminal charges filed. The works. I want this guy to understand that if he so much as thinks about Lily Chen again, his life will become a living nightmare." His lead lawyer, a guy named Stern, looked deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwood, his father is Judge Thompson. These things take time, delicate political considerations. We need to be strategic here." Alexander's eyes went icy, completely cold. "I do not care if his father is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Make it happen." Stern nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Meanwhile, Victoria Blackwood received the results of her background check. She sat in her private office, overlooking Central Park, reading the report with growing disbelief. Lily Chen, age 24, no criminal record, no debt, no wealthy relatives, no hidden agendas, nothing suspicious at all. In fact, the report painted a picture of a woman who had survived the unthinkable. Hospital records from 6 years ago, emergency surgery on damaged vocal cords, a case that was dismissed due to lack of evidence, a pattern of moving from city to city, always looking over her shoulder. Victoria put down the report, her brow furrowed. She had been so certain that Lily was another gold digger, another social climber, another woman trying to exploit her brother's wealth and her nephew's condition. But Lily was exactly what she appeared to be, a survivor, a fighter, for the first time in years. Victoria Blackwood felt something she rarely experienced: shame. She picked up her phone and called her brother. "Alexander," she said, her voice unusually subdued, "I need to apologize. I had Lily investigated, and I was wrong about her. Completely, utterly wrong." There was a pause, a heavy silence. Then Alexander's voice, controlled, but curious. "What did you find?" "Everything," Victoria admitted. "Her ex-boyfriend, the attack, the court case that went nowhere. She has been running for 6 years, Alexander, and she has never asked anyone for help." Alexander was silent for a long moment, a beat. Then he said something Victoria did not expect. "Invite her to the charity gala next month as my official guest." Victoria almost dropped her phone, nearly fumbled it. The Blackwood Annual Charity Gala was the social event of the season, the one everyone wanted an invite to. Bringing someone as your official guest was a declaration. It meant something big. "Are you sure?" Victoria asked, incredulous. "That is a significant, bold statement." "I am sure," Alexander said, his voice firm. "And Victoria, thank you for telling me the truth." He hung up before she could respond, leaving her speechless. In the garden below, Lily had no idea her life was about to change again. She was sitting with Ethan, helping him arrange smooth river stones into patterns on the manicured lawn. It had become their daily ritual, a peaceful moment in their chaotic lives. What she did not know was that Ethan was changing too, in ways no one could have predicted. The first sign came 3 days after Derek's break-in. Lily was in the library, A grand room filled with leather-bound books. Looking at a picture book with Ethan, she pointed to a dog in the illustration, a golden retriever. Ethan stared at it for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he made a sound, not a word, not quite, but a sound that was clearly meant to communicate something. A guttural hum. His small hand touched the page, and he made the sound again. Lily's heart stopped, skipped a beat. She knew that Ethan's therapists had been trying for years to get him to vocalize, even the simplest sound. And here he was, making sounds, while looking at a book with her. She did not make a big deal of it, did not want to pressure him. She had learned that pressure made Ethan retreat, withdraw into himself. Instead, she simply made a similar sound back, a soft hum, and pointed to another animal, a fluffy cat. For the next hour, they communicated in sounds, a symphony of hums and clicks, not words, but sounds that meant something, that connected them. When Alexander found them, he stood in the doorway watching, unseen, unheard. His eyes were wet, shimmering with unshed tears. "Do you know?" he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "that his speech therapist has been working with him for 2 years. She has never gotten him to vocalize voluntarily. Not once." Lily wrote on her notepad, her hand shaking slightly. "I am not trying to fix him. I am just being with him." Alexander read it, then read it again, his gaze intense. "That is exactly what he needs," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What we all need sometimes. Someone who is just there, not trying to fix us. Just being present." Their eyes met, held for a moment too long. Something passed between them, a spark, a current. Something neither of them was ready to name. Not yet. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Then a month. Lily had officially moved into the mansion, trading her small apartment for the sprawling estate. She had her own suite, luxurious and comfortable, her own routine, her own place in the household. She helped with Ethan's care, reading to him, playing games, simply being present. She assisted Alexander with his schedule, organizing his meetings, managing his correspondence. She had even started learning sign language, thinking it might help her communicate better with Ethan, bridge the gap. What she did not expect was that Ethan would learn it with her, mirroring her efforts. By the end of the first month, Ethan could sign 10 words. Simple things like eat, more, book, and play. By the end of the second, he could sign 50, forming short sentences, expressing his needs and desires. His therapists were astonished. His doctors were baffled. His father was overwhelmed with gratitude, bursting with pride. And Victoria? Victoria had done a complete reversal. A 180, she now treated Lily like the sister she never had. Showering her with affection and support, she took her shopping for the charity gala, introduced her to the family tailor, insisted on personally selecting her gown, wanting her to feel like royalty. "You are going to make my brother very happy," Victoria said one afternoon, while they were having tea in the sun-drenched conservatory. "I can see it in the way he looks at you. That man is completely smitten." Lily shook her head, trying to deny the undeniable, and wrote on her notepad, "We are just friends. I work for him. It's strictly professional." Victoria laughed, a warm, knowing sound. "My dear, Alexander Blackwood does not look at any of his employees the way he looks at you. Trust me. I have known him his entire life. I see the way his eyes linger on you, the way he softens when you're near. It's obvious to everyone. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, a blush creeping up her neck. She had been trying very hard not to think about Alexander that way, to keep her feelings in check. He was her employer, her protector, the father of the child she had grown to love. A man who was worlds away from her, but late at night, when the mansion was quiet and she was alone with her thoughts, she could not deny the truth, the undeniable pull. Something was growing between them, something powerful and undeniable, something that scared her as much as it thrilled her, a dangerous spark that threatened to ignite into a full-blown inferno. The charity gala arrived on a cool autumn evening. The air crisp and clear, Lily stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. Victoria had chosen a deep emerald gown, a stunning creation of silk and lace that made her eyes glow with an almost otherworldly light. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, framing her face perfectly. Diamond earrings, shimmering teardrops that Victoria had insisted she borrow, caught the light, sparkling like stars. She looked completely different, almost unrecognizable, like she was born into this world of wealth and power, a world that was always hers. A knock echoed at the door. She opened it to find Alexander standing there, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked at her, and for a long moment, neither of them moved, captivated by the sight before them. "You look," he started, then stopped, his voice suddenly husky. "Beautiful. It doesn't seem like a strong enough word." Lily smiled and reached for her notepad, ready to capture the moment, but before she could even begin to write, Alexander gently took her hand. "No notepad tonight," he said, his gaze intense. "Tonight, you don't need words. Just be with me." She nodded, her heart pounding so hard. She was certain he could hear it, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. They walked into the ballroom together, a glittering spectacle of elegance and excess. Crystal chandeliers sparkling like captured starlight. A string quartet playing a melody that seemed to weave through the very air. Hundreds of New York's most powerful people, adorned in their finest attire. A sea of wealth and influence, and every single one of them was staring at the woman on Alexander Blackwood's arm. Their eyes filled with curiosity and speculation. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. A hushed and excited murmur. Who is she? Where did she come from? Is she his new girlfriend, or something more? Alexander ignored them all, seemingly impervious to the scrutiny. He led Lily through the throng with quiet confidence, introducing her to business partners and old friends alike. His grip on her hand unwavering, a silent declaration of his intentions. Halfway through the evening, as they stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling like a million fallen stars, Alexander turned to her, his expression serious. "Lily," he said, his voice low and resonant, "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat, waiting, her heart in her eyes. "When you jumped into my car that night, I had already given up on finding happiness. My wife left when Ethan was diagnosed. She said she didn't sign up to raise a broken child. Those were her exact words. Broken." His jaw tightened at the memory, the pain still raw, as if the wound had just been inflicted. I spent 3 years after that, believing that love was something I would never have again, that my only purpose was to protect Ethan and build my empire. And then you appeared, soaking wet, terrified, holding a notepad. He reached out and gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbone. "You changed everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for Ethan, for me. You made me believe." Again, Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She wanted so badly to speak, to tell him that he had changed everything for her too, that he had given her safety when she had none, hope when she had forgotten what it felt like, but the words would not come. Trapped behind a wall of silence. They never did. So instead, she did the only thing she could. She stood on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, a silent testament to the emotions that overwhelmed her. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, hesitant. Two people, both wounded, both afraid of breaking something precious. Then Alexander's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer. And the kiss deepened into something that made the rest of the room disappear. The music fade, the lights dim, until only they existed in that single, perfect moment, when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard. Alexander smiled, and a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "I have wanted to do that for 2 months," he admitted, his voice laced with a mixture of relief and desire. Lily smiled back, her eyes shining with unshed tears and a newfound sense of hope. Neither of them noticed the photographer who had captured the entire moment, the perfect angle, the perfect light, the perfect story. Or the reporter who was already typing up the story, her fingers flying across the keyboard, eager to break the news to the world. Or the man standing in the shadows at the edge of the ballroom, watching them with murder in his eyes, his face twisted with rage and resentment. Derek had gotten out of jail 3 days ago. His father had pulled strings, used his considerable influence to make the charges disappear. Just like always, the system was rigged, and he had spent every moment since planning his revenge, consumed by a burning desire to make Lily pay. Seeing Lily kiss another man, seeing her happy, seeing her moving on with her life, it broke something inside him that was already cracked. A fragile sense of control shattering into a million pieces. She was supposed to be broken forever. That was the point. If she could not speak, she could not tell anyone what he had done. If she could not speak, she would always need him. If she could not speak, she would never be able to leave him. But she had left. And now she was kissing a billionaire at a charity gala, while wearing a dress that cost more than Derek made in a month. He clenched his fists so hard, his nails drew blood, but he barely felt the pain. His anger was all-consuming. "Enjoy your night, Lily," he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. "It will be your last happy one." The next morning, the story was everywhere. Billionaire Alexander Blackwood debuts Mystery Woman at annual gala. The headlines screamed from every news outlet, accompanied by a photo of their kiss. Plastered across every front page, it was trending on every social media platform, the internet abuzz with speculation. Victoria called first thing in the morning. "Well," she said, sounding amused, "you certainly know how to make a statement." Alexander looked at Lily, who was sitting across from him at the breakfast table, her face pale as she scrolled through the news on her phone, her eyes darting nervously. "Lily," he said gently, "I am sorry. I should have been more careful. I didn't think about the photographers." She shook her head, her movements tight and strained, and wrote on her notepad, her hand trembling slightly. "I don't care about the photos. I care that he might see them. Derek, of course. That was her real fear, always, lurking beneath the surface, not the public attention, not the gossip, but the possibility that her abuser now knew exactly where she was and who she was with. A chilling realization that threatened to undo all the progress she had made. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Let him see," he said, his voice hard, a steel edge to his tone. "Let him see that you are not hiding anymore, that you have people who will protect you, that you are no longer alone." Lily looked at him, her gaze searching, in his eyes. She saw something she had never seen before, not pity, not obligation, not a sense of duty. Love. And for the first time in 6 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved it, that she was worthy of it. That afternoon, something happened that no one could have predicted. A moment so unexpected, so profound, that it would change everything. Lily was in the playroom with Ethan, their laughter echoing in the brightly colored space. They were building a tower with blocks, a precarious structure of red, yellow, and blue. It was a good day. Ethan was calm, focused, even smiling occasionally, a rare and precious sight. Then, the tower fell. Not dramatically, not with a crash, just a few blocks tumbling down. A minor disruption in the carefully constructed order. Normally, this would cause Ethan to have a meltdown. Change was hard for him. Imperfection was unbearable. But today, something different happened. Ethan looked at the fallen blocks, his expression momentarily confused, then at Lily, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment of connection, then back at the blocks, his brow furrowed in concentration. And then, he said a word. Not signed, not vocalized randomly, an actual word, formed with intention and meaning. "Mommy!" Lily froze. She must have misheard, her mind playing tricks on her. Ethan did not speak. Ethan had never spoken a full word in his entire life. But then he said it again, clearer this time, his voice stronger, while looking directly at her. His eyes locked on hers. "Mommy," the block tower lay forgotten on the floor, a symbol of the structures they were breaking, the therapy goals that had seemed impossible, unreachable, lay shattered with it, replaced by a moment of extraordinary achievement. In their place was a miracle, wrapped in a single word, a testament to the power of love and connection. Lily started crying, her tears flowing freely, not quiet tears, not polite tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere she had buried long ago, a place of pain and longing, finally released. She pulled Ethan into her arms, hugging him tightly. He let her, melting into her embrace. He even hugged her back, his small arms wrapping around her neck. A gesture of love and trust that melted her heart. And that was how Alexander found them 10 minutes later. Lily crying on the playroom floor, Ethan in her arms, both of them holding on like they would never let go. A tableau of pure, unadulterated emotion. "What happened?" Alexander asked, his voice alarmed, his eyes scanning the room for signs of distress. Lily looked up at him, her face wet with tears, her expression radiant, but she was smiling, a smile that reached her soul. She could not tell him. The words still eluded her, so she signed it instead. Using the ASL she had been learning, her fingers flying through the air, he spoke. He called me Mommy. Alexander stared at her, his mind struggling to comprehend what she was saying, then at Ethan, who was still nestled in Lily's arms, looking peaceful and content, then back at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That is impossible," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. His specialists said he might never speak. They said his brain processes language differently. Lily wiped her eyes. She wrote on her notepad with shaking hands, "I think he was always capable. He just needed the right reason." Alexander sank to the floor beside them. For a long moment, the three of them just sat there. Father, son, and the woman who had stumbled into their lives by accident and changed everything. Then Ethan looked at his father. His mouth moved. He was trying to form another word. Everyone held their breath. "Da," Ethan said. "Da, da." Alexander Blackwood, one of the most powerful men in the city, burst into tears. They stayed on that playroom floor for an hour, laughing, crying, marveling at the miracle they had just witnessed. Finally, Alexander looked at Lily with an intensity that made her heart stop. "Marry me," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement, a declaration. Lily's eyes went wide. She started to reach for her notepad, but Alexander stopped her. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months," he said. I know this is insane. I know there are 100 reasons why you should say no." He took both of her hands in his. "But I also know that you are the best thing that has ever happened to me and my son. I know that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to see is your face. I know that when something good happens, you are the first person I want to tell, and when something bad happens, you are the only one who makes me feel like it will be okay." Ethan was watching them both, his eyes moving between his father and Lily. "Marry me," Alexander said again. "Be Ethan's mother. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you and loving you and proving that you deserve every good thing this world has to offer." Lily stared at him, the man who had picked up a stranger in the rain, the man who had given her shelter without asking anything in return, the man whose son had just called her Mommy. She could not speak, but she did not need to. She nodded. Yes. Alexander pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and the promise of forever. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. A storm was coming. But neither of them knew that the storm had a name. Derek. He had been planning for weeks now, watching, waiting, learning their routines. The mansion was a fortress, yes, but every fortress had weaknesses. And Derek had found one, Maria, Lily's former co-worker, the one who had told him about the mansion in the first place for the right price. Maria had agreed to do something more, something that would require her to use the catering access she still had from a previous job, something that would happen at the engagement party. Alexander was already planning. Derek smiled in the darkness of his apartment, surrounded by photos of Lily, photos he had taken over 6 years of stalking, photos of her sleeping, working, running away, always running away. Soon, he thought, You will not be able to run anymore. The engagement party was set for 2 weeks after the proposal. Victoria threw herself into the planning with terrifying efficiency. Invitations went out to 500 of the city's most influential people. Caterers were hired, florists were consulted, security was quadrupled. Nobody noticed the new server, who had been added to the catering staff at the last minute. A young woman with nervous eyes who kept glancing at the exits. Maria, she did not want to do this. But Derek had threatened her. Family. Her mother lived alone in a small house on the east side. Her sister had 2 young children. "Do this one thing for me," Derek had said, "and I will leave you all alone, forever." Refused, and, well, you know what I am capable of. So Maria was here, a small vial hidden in her pocket, waiting for the right moment. The party was in full swing when it happened. Lily was standing with Alexander, accepting congratulations from guests, when she felt a hand on her arm. She turned to see a server, offering her a glass of champagne. "For the happy couple," the server said, smiling. Something about the smile seemed off, but Lily could not place. Why? She took the glass, raised it to her lips, and then she saw Maria's face properly. For the first time, recognition hit like a lightning bolt. This was Maria, her former co-worker, the one who had sold her out to Derek, the one who had betrayed her. Lily froze, the glass inches from her mouth. Maria's eyes widened. She knew she had been recognized. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to warn, but before she could speak, the ballroom doors burst open. Derek strode in like he owned the place. He was wearing a tuxedo. His hair was perfectly styled. He looked like any other guest, except for his eyes. His eyes were wild, dangerous. "Lily!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the music and conversation. "Did you really think you could replace me?" The room went silent. 500 people turned to stare. Security moved immediately. 6 guards converged on Derek from different directions. But Derek had planned for this, too. He pulled out a gun. "Everyone stay back," he screamed. "This is between me and my property." Lily felt Alexander's arm wrap around her, protectively. She felt him pushing her behind him, shielding her with his body. "You made a mistake coming here," Alexander said. His voice was calm, too calm. Derek laughed. "A mistake? The only mistake was letting you take what belongs to me." He raised the gun, pointing it at Alexander. "Move away from her," Derek commanded. "Now, or I will shoot you and take her anyway." Alexander did not move. "Do you really think you can shoot me in front of 500 witnesses and get away with it?" "My father is a judge," Derek said while grinning. "I can get away with anything." The standoff lasted an eternity. Seconds, that felt like. Hours, and then something unexpected happened. A small figure pushed through the crowd. A little boy with dark hair and eyes that saw the world differently than everyone else. Ethan. He walked directly toward Derek. No fear, no hesitation. Just a child who had learned to connect with the world. in his own, unique way. "A bad man," Ethan said clearly. "Leave my mommy alone." Derek's face went pale. He had not expected this. A child, speaking, defending the woman he had tried to silence forever. "Get that kid away from me," Derek said, his voice shaking. But Ethan did not move. He stood there, small and brave, staring at the man who wanted to hurt his new mother. Lily's heart was breaking. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run to Ethan. She wanted to protect him the way he was trying to protect her. But she could not make a sound. So she did the only thing she could. She stepped out from behind Alexander. Derek's eyes snapped to her immediately. The gun swung in her direction. "There you are," he breathed. "My Lily, my silent, beautiful Lily." Lily walked forward slowly, not toward Chad, toward Owen. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around the little boy. Then she looked up at Chad, and for the first time in 6 years, she was not afraid. She had spent so long running, hiding, being silent, but Chad had already taken her voice. She would not let him take anything else. She reached for the notepad she always carried, wrote 2 words, held it up for everyone to see. "I am free." Chad's face twisted with rage. "No!" he screamed. "You are mine. You will always be mine." He raised the gun higher. His finger moved toward the trigger, but he never got to pull it. A single shot rang out, but it did not come from Chad's gun. It came from behind him, from Barry, Alexander's head of security, who had been quietly moving into position the entire time. The bullet hit Chad's hand. The gun clattered to the floor. Chad screamed in pain, clutching his bleeding fingers. Within seconds, 6 security guards had him pinned to the ground. His screams of rage echoed through the ballroom as he was dragged away. "This is not over!" he shrieked. "I will find you! I will always find you!" But his voice was fading, growing distant. And then he was gone. The ballroom was silent. 500 people stood frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. Then Owen spoke again. "Mommy okay?" Lily pulled him closer, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos and fear and the aftermath of violence, she felt something she had not felt in 6 years. Peace. The next few weeks were a blur of police statements and court proceedings and media attention. But this time, things were different. This time, Chad's father could not make the charges disappear. There were 500 witnesses. There was video footage from the security cameras. There was undeniable evidence. Chad was charged with breaking and entering, assault, attempted murder, and stalking. His father tried to intervene, but Alexander's lawyers were better, much better. In the end, Judge Thompson was forced to recuse himself from any involvement. The case was transferred to a different jurisdiction, and Chad faced justice for the first time in his life. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Lily watched from the gallery as the verdict was read. She felt Alexander's hand in hers. She felt Owen sitting beside her, occasionally signing words he had learned. And she felt something she thought she would never feel again: closure. But the story does not end there. Because sometimes, when you have been through enough darkness, The universe decides to give you light. 3 months after Chad's conviction, Alexander came home with news. "There is a doctor," he said, "a specialist in vocal cord reconstruction. He has been following your case in the news. He thinks he might be able to help." Lily stared at him. She had given up on her voice years ago. The damage Chad had done was supposed to be permanent. Every specialist she had seen had told her the same thing. She wrote on her notepad, "That is impossible." Alexander smiled. "I used to think Owen speaking was impossible too. And then you came along. The surgery took 8 hours. It was risky, experimental. There were no guarantees. But when Lily woke up, the doctor was smiling. "Try to say something," he said, "just a whisper. Do not strain yourself." Lily opened her mouth. She tried to make a sound, the same way she had tried 1,000 times before, only to be met with silence. But this time, something happened. A sound came out. Rough, barely audible. But there, Alexander grabbed her hand. His eyes were wet. Again, the doctor encouraged, "Try again." Lily concentrated, drew in a breath, pushed the air through her damaged, repaired, miraculous vocal cords. "Alexander," she whispered. It was the first word she had spoken in 6 years. The room erupted. The doctor was cheering. The nurses were crying. Alexander was kissing her hands, her forehead, her cheeks, and somewhere in her chest. A part of Lily that had been frozen for 6 years finally thawed. Recovery took months. Speech therapy, vocal exercises, learning to use a voice that felt foreign after so long. But every day, she got a little stronger, a little clearer, a little more herself. The first time she read a bedtime story to Owen out loud, she cried the entire time. So did he. So did Alexander, who was watching from the doorway. "Love you, Mommy," Owen signed, then said, "I love you too," Lily said back. Her voice was still raspy, still imperfect, but it was hers, and it was beautiful. The wedding took place on a spring day, exactly 1 year after Lily had jumped into a stranger's car. The ceremony was held in the mansion garden, the same place where Lily and Owen had built their first stone tower together. 500 guests watched as Lily walked down the aisle in a white gown that made her look like an angel. But she only had eyes for 2 people, the man waiting for her at the altar, and the little boy standing beside him as ring bearer. When the officiant asked if she took Alexander Blackwood to be her husband, Lily did not write her answer. She did not sign it. She spoke it. "I do," she said. Her voice was clear, strong, the voice of a woman who had found her way back from the darkness. Alexander's eyes glistened as he said his vows. And when they kissed as husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause. Victoria was crying into an expensive handkerchief. Barry was trying very hard to maintain his professional composure, and failing. Even the most jaded guests were dabbing at their eyes, but the moment everyone would remember came later, during the reception, when Owen stood up on a chair, demanded everyone's attention, and gave a speech. "My mommy was quiet," he said, "like me. But she talked to me anyway, with her eyes, with her hands, with strawberries." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Now she has words," Owen continued, "and I have words. And we found each other. He looked at Lily, his eyes shining with the pure love that only a child can offer. Thank you for not giving up on me. Mommy, I will never give up on you either. Lily could not stop the tears. She rushed to Owen and lifted him into her arms, holding him so tightly that he squeaked in protest. But he was smiling. They all were. 5 years later, the Blackwood family had grown. Twin girls, Rose and Ivy, had joined the family. They had their mother's eyes and their father's stubbornness. Owen was now 11, still seeing the world in his own unique way, but also thriving in ways no one had predicted. Lily had become an advocate for domestic violence survivors. She became a beacon of hope, speaking at conferences around the globe, using the voice that had been stolen from her to empower others to find their own. Her foundation, it had aided thousands of women escaping situations of abuse and despair. Alexander, he took a step back from some of his demanding business ventures to prioritize family. He still helmed Blackwood Industries, of course, but he made it a point to be home every night for dinner. He made sure to attend every school play, every soccer game. He resolved to never miss a single precious moment in his children's unfolding lives. And Derek. Derek remained where he belonged, in prison. He'd be there for at least another decade, a consequence of his choices, his father's career, utterly destroyed, his family's reputation in tatters. He had lost it all. Lily rarely gave him a second thought anymore. But when she did, she didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Instead, something akin to pity, a weary acknowledgement of a life tragically wasted. He had tried to silence her, to own her, to break her. Instead, he had inadvertently set her on a path, a journey to discover everything she had ever longed for. Sometimes, she mused, the universe possesses a particularly wry and unexpected sense of justice. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Alexander surprised Lily with a trip back to the exact spot where their lives had first intertwined. They stood together on that familiar street corner, the very place where she had impulsively jumped into his Escalade. It had been raining that night, a relentless downpour, just as it was now. But this time, Lily wasn't running from anything. She was standing there, in the rain, beside her beloved husband, laughing freely, allowing the water to soak through her expensive coat, because some moments, they are worth sacrificing an outfit for. Do you ever wonder, Alexander asked softly, what would have happened if you had chosen a different car that night? Lily smiled radiantly. Every day, she confessed, and every single day, I am overwhelmingly grateful that I chose yours. Alexander gently pulled her close, enveloping her in his embrace. So am I, he whispered. So am I. They kissed in the rain, lost in the moment, just like in the movies, just like in the fairy tales that Lily had long ago stopped believing in, because sometimes, against all odds, the fairy tales are true. Sometimes the brooding dragon king inexplicably falls in love with the quiet, seemingly fragile princess. Sometimes the villain truly does get what he deserves. Sometimes two broken people find solace and healing in each other's arms, becoming whole. And sometimes a single act of kindness, a stranger extending a helping hand to a desperate woman on a dark and rainy night, can dramatically alter the entire course of two lives forever. What was the kindest thing a stranger ever did for you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, touched your heart, the Super Thanks button is a wonderful way to support the creation of more stories like this one. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps bring these tales of hope, resilience, and healing to life. The story of Lily and Alexander serves as a powerful testament that love can indeed be discovered in the most unexpected and unlikely of places. That silence should never be mistaken for weakness, that asking for help is not a sign of failure, but rather an act of courage. And that sometimes, even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the darkest of nights ultimately lead to the brightest of dawns. Thank you for watching. Until next time.